So I know that you've directed Cymbeline with the factory. Like I saw that happen at the Willow Globe, which was really fun. But Sue said to me that Cymbeline's actually your favourite play.
It's one of them. My favourite Shakespeare changes from one year to the next. Depends what mood I'm in, and it depends what you want it for. If you want a sort of perfect play, then Twelfth Night. If you want an incredible comedy, then Midsummer Night's Dream. If you want the most extraordinary poetry, then The Tempest.
So the other day you definitely said to Sue that Cymbeline was your favourite. So it was your favourite that day. Why was it your favourite that day?
I think it's often my favourite. It's my favourite on a lot of days because it is so wonky. It has so many different elements, and it really sets itself a kind of impossible task to combine the kind of adventure story, the historical narrative, the sort of romantic comedy almost, and the certainly the elements of tragedy and farce that it manages to combine. And then it somehow sort of miraculously does pull it all together in Act 5 in a way that is so ludicrously virtuosic and skillful, and yet somehow shamelessly unsatisfactory.
Yes.
It's
Yeah.
really shameless. So I kind of love all that. I love the shamelessness of the play, and I love the incredible language.
It feels to me a little bit like Pericles in that way, that has a journey in these different places, and then it sort of meanders here, there, and everywhere, and then comes all together at the end. And you think, how did that happen? How did we get there?
Yes, and in a way, it's better plotted than Pericles, which is really sort of ragged. But at the same time, because it sets itself to tie up all of these different elements, you can't help but feel that the invasion of Britain element just doesn't really ever take off. You never really care about it, and you never really give a toss about whether King Cymbeline will win or not. It's definitely wonky, but there is something magical about it.
And with that history, I've got I asked the Willow Globe Company for questions, and they've sent me some. And somebody asked, do you think Shakespeare was sort of sending the Italians, the Romans, up? Why do you think he represents them as he does? Is this a kind of standard stereotype of them at that time, or was he trying to get the English on side? Or
well, I mean, it's always difficult to talk about the author's intention and things like this, because in many ways I feel like our job as theatre makers isn't to worry about any of that, is just to speak the words like you mean them, and not play any idea of the scene. Because you can imagine, if you've decided that it is, for example, a piece about how Italians are all sort of Vespa driving, cigarette smoking seducers, then you're only going to do bad acting as you try and demonstrate that. And it's going to be cheap. So I always feel like you can really just say the words because you mean them, and leave the audience to make that kind of conclusion. There's no doubt that, like any writer, Shakespeare is relying on certain preconceptions of his audience for the fun of what he does. There's definitely some very nicely observed comedy in the unsophisticated Englishman in Italy trying to keep up with all these Italians and feeling out of his depth. It's clear that that's the source of some of that comedy, but I don't think it's necessarily being critical of anyone. I think it is just, it's always fun when you take a stereotype or a cliche like that and explore what it might mean in reality. And of course, what it means in reality in this case is something very dark, that you end up, when you feel at a disadvantage and feel that you're losing ground to more sophisticated people, you end up saying stupid things like, do you want to fight about that then?
Yeah. Yeah, it is interesting though, I suppose, in today's current context, that thing, I think we're very sensitive now, or more aware of what kind of stereotypes and cliches that we're sharing out. And Giacomo certainly ticks a lot of those, you know, seducer, Vesper, I mean, boxes. I found it interesting that I read that Cymbeline was probably written after a plague and was shown in theatres after a plague had happened, which seems strange as we're currently in lockdown and it wasn't planned to be during a plague. But that's happening now and feels very resonant today, especially the relationship with nature and the mentions of money and what's money really worth. How else do you think Cymbeline is particularly relevant to today?
I think all the plays are relevant to today, and I think the crucial thing about relevance in the theatre is to resist it at all costs. Because all we do when we decide why things are relevant and try and shove it down the audience's throat is we rob them of the reason they actually come to the theatre, which is not necessarily for escapism. I don't mean that people only want a nice story and nothing else, but they want to see people going through human conundrums and problems and dealing with them well or badly or disastrously badly. And we want to watch those interactions, and we want to let that cook in the way that theatre really cooks, which is not on the conscious level of, oh yeah, that's a bit like this. That only makes for boring thinking and doesn't change anyone's mind. What we actually come to theatre for is a basic human need, which is to watch human interaction. So that's why Shakespeare keeps on getting done. It's why all the great old plays keep getting done, even though people try and hammer them into being about this or that current problem, when audiences are perfectly capable of seizing those connections for themselves. When we eventually here at the Shore get to do all the plays we've been rehearsing, we can see in every single one, there are going to be lots of moments where the audience are going to go, wow, and you chose that play even before you knew about all of this. Wow, isn't that interesting? But we're not going to do any underlining of those connections for them.
And those connections are perhaps only becoming apparent because of the context that we're in. And so we as audience are making those connections rather than having been put there for that reason.
A, they weren't put there for that reason, and B, we as theatre makers, if we put them there for that reason, we did it several weeks ago and the world has already changed since then. So, you know, even if you got together at 7:55, as it were, and with the company and said, right, let's lean into that line because it has taken on new relevance today. Half an hour later, when you come to that line, it's already not fresh. So it's at that moment that theatre becomes relevant in the minds and hearts of people. And this is where we all can't wait to get together with an audience again, because we've all had that experience of hearing people around you go, ha, and going, what? Oh gosh, yes, I see. So we become a kind of hive mind where someone who's had an interesting connection, we just hear that land on them and then we get it too.
And that's hard on Zoom right now, isn't it? Getting that kind of collective consciousness that's happening.
You can't get it. And you have to just say goodbye to it, really, and hope that the whole experience of this, which I believe it will do, makes everyone just more aware of how much value there is in really being in the same room. Yes, we have to make sure we're safe before we can do it, and we have to not cough on each other. And I, for one, am looking forward to the fact that people are going to be reluctant to just cough and cough and cough and cough like they do in theatres, where everyone else in the room is looking at them like, seriously? You're not just going to get up and go outside to have that coughing fit? But quite apart from grumpy moments like that, it is making, I hope, making everyone just go, okay, it's kind of fun to watch this run of Charlie's Aunt on Zoom, but it doesn't mean I don't want to see them do it and be in the room with an audience, all waiting in that pause because they know the next line is going to be funny. You can't get any of that on Zoom.
It's being part of that same moment that you can't get even in this chat, because you've got different stuff going on around you and I have here, and different stuff out of the window to think about.
Yeah, it's a different time of day.
Yes.
Where you are. It's a very big thing, that. It's a big thing because we're in different energies.
Yeah.
You know?
Yeah, different, yeah.
I call and talk to my kids, you know, and because they're in Britain and I'm here, 5 hours apart, given when we are available, one or other of us is too tired really to enjoy it. Or at least for long.
Yeah.
And the other one's like, no, stay, talk, I've got jokes.
I find like I'm teaching online at the moment, and I find the energy that I have to give teaching online is threefold to what I'd be doing in the classroom.
Yeah, I'm sleeping very well at the moment.
It's exhausting.
And I've shortened all my rehearsals because we found that 3 hours is too long. We do 2.5, and then we're all just bagged.
Yeah. We're doing, with the Willow Globe, we're doing 1.5 hours, and that for me is, boom, enough. Yeah, interesting. Okay, so when you've staged Cymbeline, how many times have you done that? Do you know?
Well, in a way, I've never done Cymbeline because we did it with the factory, which, as you know, isn't really staging. That's really just me making life difficult for them and seeing how they solve it. And the only time I've staged anything called Cymbeline, it was actually we called it, oh my God, I can't remember now. Cymbeline the handkerchief or something, something silly. And it was a 90-minute 4-person version. And it was a lot of fun, actually. I don't know if it probably wasn't 90 minutes, probably more like 75. And we had Imogen, as we called her, Imogen, posthumous doubled with Clotten, which is an easy double. That's an easy double, and of course it works really well, especially when she discovers his headless body, when it is actually the same actor. And Imogen, posthumous Clotten, Yakimo, and oh no, that's right. How funny! I'm confusing two different things. I've seen posthumous Clotten doubled, but we didn't do that. We did Imogen, posthumous Clotten, Yakimo, and Yakimo doubled with Pisanio. And
that was a staged version.
Yeah, we took it on tour around Britain, and it was a lot of fun. It was my first ever gig. I was assistant director with the English Shakespeare Company, with a terrible tour of Merchant of Venice and Volpone. I think Phil and Sue may have seen it, and they can tell you how dreadful the productions were. And I was the assistant director, and so we're going around all of these nondescript English towns, like Hull and Darlington, and I got 4 of the actors who were in small roles, and we would sort of sneak back into the theatre at midnight and rehearse on the stage, all around Britain for about 6 months. So we had a really good show by the time we came into London. The main shows were playing the Lyric Hammersmith, so I hired the studio for 4 Sundays and played them. And then people liked it, so we took it around on tour as its own thing.
To theatres?
Yeah.
Yeah. But so you've done that version, and I've seen your version with the factory, and I'm sure you've seen other versions. And so a question from the company was, have you got a favourite all-time favourite production of Cymbeline?
Actually,
Either that you've done or seen.
Well, I mean, I can't judge my own. That would be silly. But I've actually never seen a production I didn't enjoy, and that's unusual. You know, I think I've been lucky. I saw a good one at Stratford, Ontario, some years ago, and the one at the Globe that Mike Alfreds did with Mark Rylance, doubling Posthumous and Clotton. That was the one I was thinking of. That was a lovely production. So I've kind of always enjoyed it, I think.
I love that idea of doubling Posthumous and Clotton because it's so funny. It's just so funny when she's like, what's the word? Compares him to his clothes, and then because of his clothes thinks it's him.
Yeah. Yeah.
And it's a bit of a send up for Imogen, really, I think, at that point.
Well, it's a very extraordinary sequence, that whole thing. And so, and this is where old plays are so great, because it's like, nowadays, that would be like Martin McDonagh or someone to have such a weird mixture of comedy and brutal rape on the corpse of her dead husband. You know, it's like, sorry, that's what? How are we supposed to take that?
Yes. And then we've got a few questions about the gender roles within the play.
Mm-hmm.
So the play demonizes a woman for having political ambitions, the Queen, and celebrates Imogen for her faithfulness to her non-royal partner. Do you think Shakespeare was tapping into the national mood after the death of Elizabeth, of women going back into their boxes and being praised for purely being decorative and non-threatening to the status quo?
I could talk all day about things like that, but I don't think they're relevant to the play. I think they're relevant. That's critics talk, and you know, I can be a critic, but I don't think I have anything to add to what intelligent people such as that person who wrote the question are themselves thinking.
Yeah. So it's something for us to have to go away and meander upon.
You can leave that to the critics. There are lots of interesting books written about all that stuff.
Yeah,
and
I'm sure.
But I just don't have anything to contribute. I haven't got any opinions that are more original than the really good academics who write about it.
I think we're going to have, do you remember Acorn at the Willow Globe at all? Yeah, she's going to come in a couple of weeks and talk about the gender roles as one of our Zoom rehearsals. Right. Because like you say, you can't really rehearse on Zoom to some extent. Mm-hmm. So we're having a couple of presentations to sort of enrich the company's understanding of it. But for me, like when I was reading the play and looking at the gender roles, I think it's still very relevant to today. But a part of me wonders, you know, if you swap those genders around, how the audience would view it. It would be so different. And I question, at what point do we stop telling these stories, or do these stories just keep being told about those particular roles of women? Do you see what I'm driving at? I think with the Me Too movement and things that are out at the moment, you think, are we just reinforcing this kind of status or status quo, or should we be telling new stories? I don't know if you've got any thoughts on that.
Yeah, I feel quite strongly that this all comes from we've been brought up with a complete misconception of theatre as a branch of the education industry, and it's not. It's not a branch of the education industry. It's not there for social improvement. We don't reinforce anything by what we do. Nobody gets oppressed or put in a box because of plays. And the audience are more intelligent than we give them credit for. And they watch those things, and they sometimes do tap into primeval prejudices and all the rest of it. But they have those prejudices anyway. They don't get reinforced. And more likely than not, if they do experience something with that, it's something quite uncomfortable these days when you notice those things happening. But again, that's not our job to lean into that and try to make people feel uncomfortable. All we're doing with our signing up theatre to be part of education is turning it into propaganda. And we've all decided we were all taught this because theatre's been taken over by left-wingers, and I am one. I'm completely part of that tribe. But the left wing has taken over theatre and said, not only is theatre a branch of education and propaganda, but it's a branch of a particular kind of education and propaganda and no other. And all we do when we buy into that is guarantee the death of theatre.
What do you mean a branch of a particular type of?
I mean that theatre is nowadays supposed only to push the agenda of the left and the centre left. You're not allowed to have a conservative idea expressed on stage without it being shot down.
Mm.
But there are plenty of conservative ideas that make a lot of sense, but you don't get them in the theatre anymore, or they get interrogated, which is just another way of saying propagandized away by people who want to signal that they don't personally hold those views, because heaven forfend that it should be a free world where you can think what you like.
And that is what the theatre offers, doesn't it? If you share those stories, that space. But I do think it does hold this, I love that theatre holds this collective consciousness that you don't get with a television, like, you know, everybody being together in that moment, seeing that on stage.
Well, we're right on the American border. We have a lot of audience from America, about 40%. Quite a lot of them are Trump supporters. Well, you know, like anyone I know, I think you have to be insane not to think of him as a dangerous, narcissistic, evil arsehole. But there is some hope for humanity in the fact that those people sit in the audience with other people and they all have an experience, and they maybe talk in the interval, they maybe talk afterwards in the gardens, and some kind of connection is kept between differing points of view, as opposed to, I only look at the things online which confirm what I already think about the world. I only read the news of my own news sources, which are biased in either direction. We are a place where people can meet, and that is why it is important that we do not propagandize at them and that we don't try to teach them. Because people, every single study shows, if you correct someone's mistaken understanding of something, they cling to it more powerfully. More hard, it's not even English. If you correct people's misconceptions, they cling on to them more violently. All you can do is make sure that people feel respected and present and heard, and then they will come round to a better understanding of the world, or you might, because it might be you that's wrong.
So the theatre offers a kind of a space that is common ground for people of all beliefs to meet in.
Well, and it allows us to model conversations that actually get somewhere.
Do you think those conversations happen that much? Like, I feel sometimes when I go to the theatre, people are very, in the UK, it's all very polite and, oh, wonderful, wonderful. And people don't perhaps have those conversations that they might, for example, in Italy, when I lived there. And again, this is a stereotype, but I felt people were really talking about the opera and what they thought was going on, and they were more open with their opinions and less shy. Yeah. I don't know if
there's a reason for stereotypes. You know, they don't tend to come from nowhere. And it's true that the British are a bit reticent about those things. And also it's true that we, in many cases, it's certainly true here, that we have a lot of people who just come as consumers of entertainment, and they want to come in, they want to be entertained, they want to go home. Well, again, it's not for me to say that's wrong, but what we do want to do, not in order to educate them, but in order that people really get an experience that they know they can't get anywhere else, we want to create an environment where you do stay and walk in the gardens and look for the poems that we have hidden among the trees and so on, so that you don't just head straight for the car and try to beat the rush.
So it's about creating an environment which encourages those conversations.
Yeah, this is where something like the Willow Globe is so great, because nobody would ever think of going to the Willow Globe driving in, head down, get into the theatre, watch the show, head down, get into your car, drive home. It's like, clearly that is not the nature of the invitation at somewhere like the Willow Globe. And I want us to have that more global sense of, no, you come here because it feels good to be here in every way. It's a basic human need to have anticipation, to have appreciation of other people, to have a chance to check out what everyone else is wearing, to have a chance to have a nice drink in a jovial setting. All of those things are part of the deal and should be part of the deal.
So a lot of theatres in the UK now, I know we're sort of branching a bit away from Cymbeline, and we'll drive back into that.
I've got 5 more minutes. So
let's go on then. Let's
yeah.
Keep the focus. So I've got a couple of questions here from Sue, actually. She asks, why do you think when the brothers are talking about burying Imogen, do they discuss the religious rites? He says, put the body with the head facing to the east instead of the west, so pre-Christian. Was it safe to do that then?
I don't know. It's a really beautiful bit, isn't it? It's a really beautiful bit. It's an amazing and very unusual for Shakespeare bit of really enjoying the kind of pagan, the gods in the earth, as they call them. You know, it's a moment straight out of Jerusalem or something.
Okay, and a sort of similar question from Sue. Do you think Shakespeare was being seditious when Guiderius says he's killed Cloten, because Cloten was a prince, but Guiderius is, though Cymbeline doesn't know it at that point?
No, I don't particularly. I mean, again, my opinion doesn't matter, but I think it's more useful to talk about genre and things like this. And if you think about someone like Northrop Frye, I don't know if you know his work, Anatomy of Criticism is a fantastic, rather dense book, but it's very interesting. And he would talk about something like Cymbeline from the point of view where I started this morning, which is, what are the genres it's playing with? And the genre that he's playing with Guiderius and Arviragus is the folktale. And in folktale, like in Winter's Tale with Perdita, in folktale, princes are princes and blood will out wherever they are. It's a trope in folktales that a prince will never be just lost to obscurity. The prince will always be found. Now, a lot of people in a very lame way will say, oh, that's very sort of aristocratic and conservative, but that's not what it's about. It's about something much more fundamental, because all of us as children, when we hear fairy tales and folk tales, we are the prince. Every single person has had the feeling as a child that maybe they're a changeling, that maybe they aren't the child of their parents, maybe they're actually someone a bit special, being secretly brought up by these strangers. There isn't anyone alive who didn't have that thought at some point in their childhood. I had it from the age of 0 to 18. And, you know, and that is what is going on in those folk tales when princes are somehow magically going to come good. So I don't think I think it's more interesting than a political or social statement.
It'll be interesting to see what she says. She said she had an answer, but she wanted to know what you thought. I feel like we've done most of these questions, and I feel like you've actually given us a lot of ideas for the company about ways to look at the play and plays in general, which is fantastic. Thank you. I don't know if you've got a general kind of note you want to give the Willow Globe company in our Zoom rehearsals.
Only that the thing that we're finding really good about Zoom rehearsals is that it forces you to go slowly. So make the most of that. Make the most of that. Take it all really slow.
Fab, thank you. I'll I'll tell Sue that, because she keeps telling us to go faster, and I have to tell her that we don't all go at the same time over the internet.
No, and that is what you can do once you get back into the room.
Yeah.
But we have a great fight director here who has a motto, which I have now stolen: go slow to go fast.
Great, thank you.
There you go.
That's great.
Practice slow. The speeding up will happen, and will happen without loss of accuracy.
Fab. Hopefully we'll find the real meaning with that as well. Take the time to. Yeah. Cheers. What do you? Bye now. Have a good day.
Yeah, you too.
Thanks very much. Thank you. Bye.
Bye.